She waits right until we. All right, we are live and back with another weekly episode, the weekly double feature. I am Chris, and I am here with Cody. Cody, how are you, sir?
Pretty good. How's everybody else?
Doing good. Good. We have not melted into the pavement yet, so yet, or burst into flames. So,
Well, it's been in the
uh,
low 90s instead of the high 90s the last couple of days.
yeah,
Not
but the
that,
humidity is
not
still
that that
pushing it.
really, yeah, it's still gross, but
We got some nice rain today, but then
yeah,
it moved through, and the sun immediately came out, and the steam was just pouring, like rolling off our roof, like the house was on fire. Lindsay said she went to the window, she was looking out, and then she looked up because we have an angle where we can see our roof, and she was like, "What is that smoke?" And I got up, and I was like, "Oh, nope, that is straight up steam just pouring off of the roof." And off of the road too. The sun, like it was dark, like the rain, it poured, and I was like, "All right, this is nice." We needed it. And then I was doing something, and I look up, and then the sun is just blaring again, and I'm like, "Great, well, we're gonna steam to death."
with a
But
vengeance.
yeah, with a vengeance, we're gonna steam like hot dogs. But uh, But yeah, we are here, and we decided for the week of July 4th, which, by the way, and I hate to keep deviating, but apparently we set a record for the hottest day on Earth
On July
recorded.
4th,
And that was the fourth, the third, and the second, all set records in a row
there you go, guys. Global
of
warming is
being.
real. We're destroying our planet and it's making us hotter.
Hey, yeah, they did. They came out. They were like, these were the hottest days recorded on the planet. So
Yeah.
there's something to think about.
Yeah.
but but anyway, yeah, pretty gnarly. But for the week of July, we were kicking around ideas, and uh, I know the Born on the Fourth of July came up, and we jumped at that
Mm-hmm.
one because I really enjoyed that movie. I went back and watched a lot of Ron Kovic interviews and stuff on YouTube, which you can go look up. They're really great. There's an interview with him in the late 70s or mid to late 70s, talking about his book, Born on the Fourth of
Mm-hmm.
July, and him talking about it in his own words, and it's very powerful. And I urge you, if you have any interest in it, just go look it up on YouTube, and it's very powerful stuff. And then Cody, you suggested the Defy Bloods,
Mm-hmm.
which was a Spike Lee joint, and one that I had slept on. I remember seeing the trailers on YouTube, and I had put it on my watch list, but it just never got around to it. Which, after watching it, I'm kicking myself because it was such a great movie. Uh, both really powerful films that deal with the Vietnam War and the effects that it had and what it did to our soldiers and the way they were treated when they came
Mm-hmm.
back, and a lot of other themes that we'll get into. But I really think that it made a great double feature for the 4th of July. And I know it's kind of a downer topic um, to
Yeah,
talk
these
about,
weren't.
being
Neither one of these films were a very brouhaha America. Yeah. These are kind of like, well, like you said, these are both movies that take place around the Vietnam War. These are movies that show like what the war did to the people that served, and really puts the war like under the microscope, right? Like uh, whatever. I
right.
don't know which movie you want to get into first, but like there's that scene in Born in the Fourth of July where he's having a breakdown at home after he's come back from rehab, and like he got drunk at the bar and kind of made an ass out of himself, and he's like yelling, and his mom's telling him to stop, and he's like, they lied to us, they lied to us, tell her, dad, it's full of shit, because like, because there's an earlier scene in the movie, because he talks about, well, you and uncle so and so serve, but you could tell the dad is like not 100% like wanting his son to go into the war, joining the Marines.
Right. And I will tell you, my dad has told me this story. I know your dad served, and my dad,
Mm-hmm.
when he graduated, they had gone from the draft to the lottery system, and
Right.
he was not picked, and but he did have friends that were picked and did not come back, and
Yeah.
he said that he had kicked around the idea of going. And my Papa, who was a World War II vet and fought in Okinawa and the Japanese, he told him, he said, son, do not, if they want you, they will come and get you. Do not volunteer unless you feel deep down that is something that you need to do. But it seemed like even my Papa at that time had some reservations about it, kind of like the dad in Born on the 4th of July, because he had lived through World War II. He had lived through the hand-to-hand combat and the brutal the horrors of war, um and just told him straight up. He goes, son, if you feel like you need to go, but don't. If they need you that bad, they'll get you. They'll come and get you. But yeah,
Well,
they're both really. And I'm not saying that uh, like I'm not saying that the people who went that they're not patriotic, or they did the wrong thing, because I do think that they spun it in a way that made a lot of people think that this was the right thing to do. Like they were going to stop communism, uh, but it was just a police action. Um, I feel silly talking about this because, like, wholeheartedly, you read into it. Like our generation, we read into it and we learn about it, and we're like, wow, okay, so they were lied to. It was wrong. But then you have like our dads and the older generation was like, no, this was like we went for a reason. We served our country, and uh, I don't know. It feels kind of weird. uh,
well, I mean, I get what you're saying, and yeah, my dad volunteered and went over. He was in the Navy for 4 years, I think 64 to 68. And,
okay,
that's pretty much everyone that has gone over now is volunteered. And there's people our ages and younger who have seen some shit. And, you know, was everything we did over in Afghanistan and Iraq for the right reasons? You can support people who serve, and they're very patriotic for serving for our country and sacrificing for the free. So, right now there's a lot of things going on, and there's a lot of freedoms being taken away from lots of Americans. But one thing right now that we still have, and hopefully will always have as American citizens, is the freedom to express our opinions. And
right,
hopefully, and that's something that people who serve do for us. And, it's just like when a lot of people got in an uproar about the football players taking a knee for all the people of color getting killed brutally by police. And they asked a lot of veterans, like, well, how do you feel about them not standing? He's like, that's what I serve for. That's their right as an American citizen, you know?
right,
So you can support anyone who serves and is a soldier, but you can criticize why our country is taking men and women over to foreign land and having them killed.
Right.
And
That's a good
even
point, Cody, and yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. Is like I don't. If anyone watches this, I don't want anyone to misconstrue what we are saying for not having any respect for our soldiers in any branch. You know, if I sit here and say that I didn't, you know, I sat with a recruiter. I graduated in 2001. A few months, a few
a
months
few months
before
before 9/11, yeah.
9/11, and I remember it. It was like that was like that was like our Pearl Harbor. And I know that seems silly,
Oh,
but that was like our Pearl Harbor. Everybody, everybody was jumping on board. I went to a friend's house, St. Scallon, who I graduated with. I hung out with the Scallon boys, and I went to his house when the recruiter came, and we both sat there and listened to that recruiter. I mean, and it's I was I mean, I was close. I really was. I was really close to joining up with Sam, and I didn't. And but he did, and he went and served, and he's still a helicopter pilot. He's still serving, and that's great. I'm so glad that nothing happened because I know he had a cousin that I hung out with. There were a lot of people that I knew that joined up and went,
wow. He's 20
and
years in. He's going to have good
yeah,
benefits.
yeah. He's 20 years in. My brother-in-law, he went in and went over and did 2 tours, and he's still in. He's in Wisconsin. Him and my little sister are up there. But but yeah, like even though I didn't go, and then years later, things start coming out, and you disagree with a lot of those things. That still doesn't mean that I didn't have respect for the people who went over there. You know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you might hear us talking. You're going to hear some stuff from me talking about how much I disagree with it, and talking about Vietnam like I was there. But
Well,
I totally disagree with Vietnam, especially with the history books and the things that come out now.
I'll put it this
Well,
way. There's probably not a more patriotic person I know than my father. And even him, who was over there and served after 50 plus years ago of his life, he has told me on numerous occasions that now he says, I don't think we were over there for the right reasons. And I think our government lied to us and put us in a war we didn't need to be in.
exactly. And if you were talking about that scene in, I guess we can go and start Born on the 4th of July.
Okay,
But
so if we're going to talk about the movie, I want to just say I think Oliver Stone, who also was a veteran, he served in the Vietnam War. You know, I think he
right,
does I think he does a great job of presenting the beginning. The first act of this movie is very much an underlying, like on the surface, you see like this picturesque Norman Rockwell Americana of what people think the 1950s was like. And that is not really what it was like
right,
for a lot of people. But you see this underlying darkness. So, like the first 4th of July parade, they bring out the veterans, all the veterans who served, and you see them walking or riding, or some of them in their wheelchairs. And you hear the fireworks go off, and you see that one guy, flinch, because
yeah,
you know
yeah,
here, and you don't think about it probably if you're not noticing, but he flinches, and you see that later with Ron Kovacs when he comes back home, and they have him in the because I hadn't seen this movie since I was a kid, because my dad made me watch Platoon. He set me down and he was like, "This is what it was like. This is one of the most accurate movies of Vietnam I've ever seen." And of
Right.
course, Oliver Stone makes this movie, which is based on a true story. It's about Ron Kovac's life, who served as a Marine. He gets injured and is paralyzed, and later becomes a prolific anti-war protester. I didn't realize how long into the movie it was until like he has a change of mind, because even after he gets injured and is even in rehab, he is still like America, rah rah rah, for
Yeah.
a lot of the movie. And it's not really till, I mean, you start seeing signs of it, but it's not really till he visits his girl that would have been his girlfriend, or the girl he liked, and he sees all those protesters get brutally attacked by the police.
Right. And it's that movie. I've watched it several times over the years, and we rewatched it, and you're right about the beginning of the movie setting up the picturesque Norman Rockwell depiction of his early life, and that is when you even nowadays when you hear people, as a lot of people say, "Oh, I wish we could go back to the 50s." That is the image that they have in their head. Is Norman
Yeah.
Rockwell is it's that
And,
picturesque.
but you got to think that is, you want to go back to when only the upper middle class to middle class white people were thriving in America, because there's a lot of people that the 1950s was not a good time for, you know.
Exactly, and they were in was it Passamaquoddy or somewhere in New,
They're,
was it
they're somewhere in
uh,
upstate New York, right?
that, yeah, yeah, that's what I thought, is they were upstate New York, so they're not down south, um, really at all. So I'm sure they weren't really steeped in. I know it was there, but it was no. I don't think it was anything like living in the South during the 50s. Uh,
Right.
with it in your face,
Hmm.
with living it day by day, and I think what that sets up is uh, the way I took it was they were blinded by patriotism. Now,
Yeah.
patriotism is not a bad thing. Like patriotism is, with all of our faults and everything that has gone on, and especially our government and parties and blah 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 and all of that. I I still consider myself a patriot, but I w- it's one thing to be blinded by patriotism, and another
Yeah,
thing to be a
it's
patriot like Ron Kovac. You were talking about how he, even after coming back wounded, he was still gung ho, and that just goes to show how gung ho everyone was about this. They were doing the right thing. They were going to stop communism before it spread to the rest of the world. And he had that one friend there. They're sitting there eating French fries, and he's like,
Oh,
"Whoa,
wait,
whoa,
he's
whoa!
already not buying
Maybe."
into this, because you can see he's laughing a little bit, or like scoffs, when Tom Berenger and that other guy show up as recruiters for the Marines, right? And he's giving his speech,
Right.
and he's already
But
like
I,
not buying into it.
yeah, yeah, and he was like, think about it, think about what you're doing, and I told you that I had buddies that went, and Sam Scallon, his cousin Robert Scallon, uh, who I've known since I was about 6, who went into the Marines. Their family had a long line of people serving in the military, And when I
Mm-hmm.
watch this movie, I think about the Scallons. I think about Robert. Like, because growing up, I mean, we were out there. We were just like those kids in the creek, running around with playing with guns and playing army men and stuff like that. And he would always tell us, "Oh yeah, my dad was in the Marines. He was in Vietnam. You know, my granddad was in World War II, and way on back. You know, kind of like Lieutenant Dan. They probably had someone that served in just about every war, and I don't mean
Well,
that to poke fun, but I just
no.
it's you know that's the mindset that they have, and it's like from a young age they're told these stories by their parents or whomever, and they're like, well, yeah, you know, we had all these
Well,
people who serve, and it's kind of the thing we do.
I'm not gonna sit here and say people who, because we've already talked about we support anyone who serves and we respect them, and I personally think all members of the U.S. military, no matter what branch they served, they are the ones that should get the benefits that the members of Congress get. They should come home and get benefits for life for serving in a
Oh, for
war.
sure.
And so I'm not going to sit here and say what one person served is more justly than the other, but just looking at World War II, you can kind of understand why everybody went over there because Hitler had to be stopped, right? He was going to try and take over the whole entire world, and he was wiping out a whole group of people just because he didn't like them. You know, as it's
Well,
the
that's
little.
World War II. That's what I say when I talk to people, and we're talking about wars in Vietnam, and World War II was justified, even though the United States, even during World War II, and nobody likes to
Did
talk about it,
atrocious things.
we
Yeah, they
horrible things.
internment so many Japanese Americans, and we're going to get a movie about it, and I totally understand why we created the nuclear bomb, but that's pretty terrible what we did to Japan, even though they did bomb us, and we were in war with them, but still, just
Right.
eradicating people like that.
Two cities.
Yeah.
Two cities. A lot of people, you just hear about um, yeah, Hiroshima. Thank you, Lindsay. You hear a lot of people talk about Hiroshima, but there was it Nagasaki that they also dropped a bomb on? Was it Nagasaki and Hiroshima?
I'm not
So
100%
they did it
sure.
twice,
Yeah, but yeah.
you know. But Hiroshima was the largest, I believe,
Hmm.
and did the most devastation. But yeah, World War II was kind of justified um, because they attacked us. They attacked us. Now that's not, and on top of Hitler. I mean, Hitler and Japan were rising up, and if they had gotten to the point where they joined forces, I mean, we'd be sitting in a totally different place right now, I believe.
Well, there's
Um,
actually a really interesting, and we're getting way off topic here, but there's an interesting Philip K.
yeah,
Dick story about that where there's an alternate reality where Germany and Japan won the war and they actually split up America on like who owns what side of America. I think it's called The Man
what
in the High
didn't they do a
Castle.
show on that? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Man in the High Castle.
It's an
But
Amazon series. But
yeah, I've heard
yeah,
some pretty good things.
but getting back to this movie, I think it does a great job. And I think, because it's based off Kovac's book and he was heavily involved, I think he even wrote the script with Oliver Stone. And Oliver Stone also being, a vet. And I'm sure that's what Kovacs responded to with Stone and him being able to be the one that ended up making the movie, is that shared
Right.
experience. And then, of course, Stone had already made Platoon, which had won Oscars, because, and he gets a lot of cameos in this movie. But I
Right.
think this movie was the first time people were like, "Oh, well, Tom Cruise can really act. He's not just a pretty boy."
You
You
know,
know,
yeah, I was telling Lindsay that the other day is out of all of Tom Cruise stuff, like he's done a lot of good stuff, but I really think he should have gotten
well, he
maybe
was
the Oscar for
nominated for this movie. He was Oscar nominated.
okay, yeah.
He did not win. He lost to another actor playing a real life person with a disability. He lost to Daniel Day-Lewis for My Left Foot.
Ah, which I've heard that's really good. I have not seen that yet,
It's a
so I can't
solid
really comment
movie.
on it.
It's not my favorite Daniel Day-Lewis movie. It's very much um, that type of awards movie that the Academy loves, though. But Daniel Day-Lewis is great in the movie because it's Daniel Day-Lewis.
I think with the subject matter that's covered and the way he portrayed, because again, you go back and watch some of the interviews and stuff of Ron Kovac, and I think he did a really good job. Although some of the wigs and the mustaches and stuff look kind of goofy, but I mean, I really think they did a great job with getting their point across. I mean, when
Yeah,
Ron comes back and he's in the VA hospital, that goes to show you the treatment that our veterans are still getting with the VA
yeah,
hospitals. Like
and
they're still atrocious.
the whole time I'm thinking is like, I'm like, I bet you that place is heavily underfunded. It's understaffed. Those people are not paid well. Even if they did care at some point,
Right.
like,
Well,
like,
the Bronx VA hospital that he was in actually got a write up in Time magazine around that time because of the conditions and to bring
yeah.
to light that, hey, look what we're doing to these people. Like, I mean, yeah, I mean, it was atrocious. It was horrible.
Well, and even when he gets injured and the medic is like, well, we have all these other guys to deal with and your injury's going to have to wait. It's like, what?
Yeah, well,
You
it's
know?
kind of like the scene. I hate to keep reverting back to like World War II, but it's like the Omaha Beach scene in Saving Private Ryan with the medic. They're going
Mm-hmm.
down the line, and he's like, priority, priority, gone, priority. Um, I forgot what other term he used, but they're just like going from body to body, doing a quick checkup. Like, oh well, you're gone. Sorry. Oh, we might can save you. Here you go. So it's kind of, yeah, it felt kind of like that. Just uh,
Triaging is a difficult position to be put in, and nobody who does it is ever compensated well enough
yeah,
to cover that.
I did think there
but
was more protesting in this movie than there actually is. I'm like, okay, so there's like one scene of him protesting at the Republican National Convention, and then it ends with him speaking at the Democrat National Convention after he writes his book.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I believe there was a whole lot more that he did. They just didn't. I think the whole point of the movie was just, you get his early life, you get him in Vietnam, which was kind of short, and then you get the after effects of that and what he had to go through up
Mm-hmm.
until the point to where he kind of changed his mind or his outlook on it and became an activist. Uh, and yeah, it's a difficult movie. It is
Yeah.
again. This is uh, and the way that they were treated. He comes
Mm-hmm.
back and I felt so bad. He's his buddy that went to school and went into business and opened the burger joint, and he's showing him around and everything, and he's like, yeah, so you can get your foot in the door and all that. And he goes, well, like, what do you mean? Like to open up a franchise together or what? And he goes, well, we got to start you out as a cashier, and you got to work your way up. You'll be, maybe you can work your way up to manager, and then we can go from there. And it's like, I mean, I felt so bad for him right there in that moment. Like, man,
Well,
he's
and he's
letting.
like, I'm getting more from the VA right now than what you would pay me. Like, and I don't have to,
Yeah.
you know, like,
It's like a
but I
smaller
mean,
scale example of what was done, right? Like they promise
mhm,
all these things, they promise all these benefits,
Yeah.
and then you do the thing, and then you get back, and none of it comes through. Like he gets a certain amount of money from the VA, but he had to live through being in a VA hospital first. He had to make it to the point where he was in one place all the time, and
mhm.
it kind of feels like that friend's trying to take advantage of him because
Well,
he's like,
for
"Yeah, it'd be
sure.
great. We support vets, except that this guy's
Yeah.
a cashier."
Right.
And
Yeah.
even to this, at this point in time, we're still not having like a healthy discussion about PTSD because, you know, the generation before, well, we just bottled it up and, you know, we just drank or smoked. We
To
didn't,
go get out on
we
the
didn't,
family. And
My
yeah.
dad has told me stories about, my granddad coming back from World War II. My dad was not born until 52, but even after 52, like when my dad was young, like a young kid, he could still remember my granddad like waking up screaming from nightmares and stuff. And there was one time my grandparents slept in separate beds. And not only was that a
Mhm,
40s thing, but I think it was to protect my for my mama to protect herself, because there were times where they would wake up and he would be dragging her under the bed for cover, and having nightmares and stuff. And that was something that just was never resolved. He
yeah, that
couldn't deer
happened
hunt.
to,
He couldn't hunt for the longest time.
that happened to my
There
grandpa
was
as well. He had basically like a nervous breakdown when he was about in his 60s. And there were a few
Yeah.
instances where he was trying to get my grandma and one of my brothers who was little at the time to like hide under the table because he said they were being bombed. You know,
Wow.
he was having flashbacks, I guess, of being in the
Yeah.
war.
They're just my one of my best friends, Josh Cook. Um, I'd go to his house, and I remember him having a talk with me. He was like, "Man, his dad was a vet, and he goes,
Hmm.
"Dude, if you get up in the middle of the night, you know, you have to be careful, because my dad will he'll have nightmares sometimes. He nearly took his head off one time. He got up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, and he was in the hallway, and his dad was having a bad dream or sleepwalking or something. And he came out of the bathroom into the hallway, and his dad turned around and swung and punched a hole in the wall, thinking that he was like an enemy or something. And he goes,
Hmm.
and he told me, I remember, he goes, "Man, you gotta be careful at night. Just turn on some lights, try to hurry. But if you see my dad, make sure he's awake. Like talk to him or
Hmm.
something, say hi, or let him know you're going to the bathroom, because it may not end well. And you're right. It's just something that was never. They didn't get any help. They didn't get any
No.
psychiatric help. They didn't get anything. And he's still alive. He's having heart issues, right?
Hmm.
And he's still having trouble with the VA. How many years
Hmm.
later, after coming home from Vietnam, and he's still having trouble with the VA? And the VA has nearly killed him a couple of times with like medications, and not.
Mm-mm.
He's had so much frustrations with it, and just trying to get the help that he needs. Um, and that's something else that they go into with this. We talked about the VA hospitals being underfunded, and
Hmm.
and not having enough staff, and when all they needed was, take care of them and let them talk to some psychiatrists. Like, I know it was a different time, and like you said, a lot of people were just like, "Oh, we're just gonna swallow it and man
Well,
up,
you
go
know, there's
go."
that whole scene when he's having, his little pity party at the bar, and those World War II
Right.
vets are like, "Quit being such a baby, bro." Like I was over there
Yeah, yeah,
too. It's like, okay, maybe you guys should more bond over you survived an extreme trauma, and maybe you did atrocious things whether you wanted to or not. Like, they're all those soldiers are shook when they shoot that
Yeah.
and they find out it's a bunch of kids in there, even though their squad leader had told them they were under attack. And then,
Right.
he accidentally shoots a fellow soldier, and his commander's like, "That's not how it happened. That's not what happened." Like, and he's like, "No,
Yeah.
that's what
Just
happened."
sweeping.
And
I,
he takes it upon himself to go tell that person's family, some guy he barely knew.
yeah.
And
I mean that
you
was that was pretty gut wrenching too. Like I know this whole movie is just a gut wrench, but the trauma that he was going through for shooting, uh, shooting one of your own guys, even if it was by accident, it's just unimaginable. And then having to go and doing it for his own mental health
yeah.
and getting it off of his conscience, and telling that family was just, man, had to be something.
What? And you're talking
And
about all these families that serve. The guy's like, "Yeah, I served in World War II, and my daddy served in World War One. There's been someone in our family that hadn't served in the last 100 or 50 years of this country, or whatever."
yeah, and then
Yeah.
when he's sitting there and you see the look on the mom's face, like, oh my God. And the mom had just said, we had a nice funeral. The honor guard drove down. In the letter, they said that he died, was it protecting his troops or like in defense of his troops or something like that. So they basically, I mean, they lied from the get-go to the
Mm-hmm.
parents, and just having that dropped, thinking your son died a hero or in the line of duty as, doing what he was supposed to do, and then finding out that he was accidentally shot by one of his own men and being found out. That's another thing too, is they also found out that they were lied to by their government,
Yeah.
by the way their son died.
Mm-hmm.
And wow, just
Yeah, it's a
just
powerfully well made movie, and Cruise does a great job in it. But it's a gut wrench of a movie. Like, this is not a happy time type of movie to put on. But
right.
I think it is definitely an interesting and well made movie that kind of shows the atrocities of Vietnam and what it did to the people that were over there. And Oliver Stone won Best Director for this. I mean, mainly because they didn't nominate the director of Driving Miss Daisy, which won Best Picture, but also because the Academy largely ignored the next movie we're talking about, Spike Lee, Do the Right Thing, that came out the same year as this film. But
Right.
do you have anything else to say about Born on the 4th of July, either one of you, before we get into the Five Bloods?
No, I think we covered the bases on that. And what, again, if you see this or if you have seen it and you want more context, I urge you to go to YouTube and look at the Ron Kovic interviews and stuff, and
Oh,
kind of hear it in his own words.
another thing this reminds me of, and of course it's not the song to play in this movie, but it reminded me of this song because of what this movie is about, which is a very popular song, Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA, which Ronald Reagan, ironically, I don't think he got it, played it as his re-election campaign song. So a lot of people, I think, thought, and maybe some people still do, think that song is like a another one of those America yeah, rah 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 song, but it's not. It's about a Vietnam vet who comes back and can't get a job. You
Yeah,
know, that's what the song is
yeah,
about. He's born in the USA, but like he's not getting treated that well.
yeah. It's kind of like CC.
Or
Well, I think CCR's
That's right.
fortunate one. You get the message more so in that one, which Fogerty was over there too.
Yeah, yeah. No, well, I think he served, but was it in Vietnam or was it after? Was it before that? Before they went over?
Well, if he wasn't in Nam, I know he was in the military
Yeah, I know he
briefly.
served, but I can't remember if it was before, like he got out before they went to Nam, or if it was like during the beginning and he came back. And because I can't remember, I know he served, like you said, but I can't remember if it was before Vietnam, like if it was just regular service before the war started. But
Mm.
yeah, I've heard CCR, which again uh is about sending poor people over.
Mm-hmm.
You know, all the people that weren't in college, like Captain Bone Spurs and all that. You know, the people who weren't rich to go to college to get out of it, or uh, yeah, oh
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, that's another thing I wanted to bring up too was the fact, and this came out here a couple of years ago, was the fact that the military, what they would do is take, because you go in and you take these tests, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they were basically using, and we'll get into this too when we get in to the Five Bloods, is the fact that they were using um, not only African Americans, but the people who scored the lowest on their aptitude tests, basically as frontline cannon fodder.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah,
Doesn't
and that
surprise me
and
at
that's
all.
yeah. They were like, well, you're not smart enough to do this, so guess what, buddy? You're going to the, we need you as cannon fodder. And uh, yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So
Well, I'm
I
ready.
think what
If you're good. Oh no, no, go ahead,
yeah.
go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say I think what the Five Bloods does really well is that it shows what effects the Vietnam War had on everybody, because you see like not only how it treated these four guys who are coming back, but also what it did to the
Right.
people of the country. Like, you know,
Yeah. That touched on
because
a lot of things.
I think he did a really great job of
And
exploring all angles of what the war did, even though it's
well,
also like a kind of Kelly's hero type of story where like we're gonna go retrieve this gold that was basically what the U.S. were gonna give to the Viet Cong, the VC.
yeah, they were gonna pay him off for something, I guess for services, and they
Mm-hmm.
didn't want it in bills. So they, gave it to him in gold, which makes sense. I mean,
was that the VC took it and that's why they couldn't recover it, but it was actually for the opposing side, like for the people on their side.
yeah, that okay,
Oh,
yeah,
for the
that's
people
what it was.
fighting with the
The German,
U.S. against the VC.
yeah,
Yeah, that yeah.
right. Well,
And then of course,
not only that.
go ahead.
Well, there was something else that it touched on too, but this is kind of going into a different in a different direction. So go ahead and finish what you were going to say.
Well, so of course, not only does he deal with the tolls of the war, but also just the mistreatment of African Americans in our country and how they've always been used like that with our military in almost every war, probably all our wars. And
Yeah,
Spike Lee is a great and interesting filmmaker. Some people would claim he's controversial. I don't know why. I mean, I guess because he's outspoken and has no problem bringing up the racist bullshit in our country. But when he first came out, he was very highly acclaimed filmmaker and praised by a lot of people. And then people are like, "Oh, Spike, does it always have to be about race?" And he's kind of had a full circle. But I mean, what does it matter if all his movies are about race? If that's what he wants to talk about as a filmmaker, and also for a long time he was really one of the only high profile African American directors making movies that was getting to make them at that high of a platform. So of course, you want to bring up subjects and things because that's how people get educated. That's how people get better knowingly, about things that don't affect you personally in your life is by reading and watching and getting exposed to things that you otherwise wouldn't know about these things. So
right,
he's doing his job as a filmmaker. And
right.
we have so many other filmmakers now of color being able to tell the stories. But, he's out here making great movies. And I think this is one of them.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And one of the other topics that this kind of brought up, and it didn't really go into it. Now, I'm going to bring up another movie, and it is a Chuck Norris movie, but it was the first time. Well, listen, it's a cheesy movie.
No, I'm just
okay?
laughing
And
about the jokes they make in the movie about Rambo
yeah,
and the Chuck Norris movie.
yeah, missing in action. Well, in the second or the third one that they did, and I used to watch it all the time because my dad recorded it off of TBS, and of course it was on TV and edited. But I remember watching it, and it's the first time that it really brought this up, or I was aware of it, was the fact that all of the children from American GIs that were conceived over there and then left after the war.
Children of the Dust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there were children over there, and I mean a lot. And I don't want to just throw out some number, but there were tons and tons of just orphanages over there that were filled up with these GIs babies, half African American babies, half white babies, that they were just left,
Mm-hmm.
But they bring that up with his, he finds out, one of the guys finds out that he has a daughter over there, and this kind of circles back around to the way that they were treated was, she was a prostitute, so she was
Mm-hmm.
already lower on the totem pole, lower than dirt, and then she had a half African American baby, and like over here, it was shunned, and she said that they called her baby cockroach and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
and they were not even deemed good enough to clean toilets, and
Yeah.
so it kind of goes into the way that they were treated, and then that guy, their tour guide, said that his dad fought with the Americans and was put into spent, was it 18 months in a re-education camp, and he
Mm-hmm.
said not
And he
everyone
said,
was so
and
lucky though. So
yeah, so that was like a better outcome for those who were helping with the Americans.
Yeah, I'm sure there were mass
My
executions
one
for that
note of
too.
this movie, and I couldn't look up, like they didn't. I guess the woman playing the mother doesn't have like a lot of screen credits. I don't buy that that woman is the same age as the actor. I don't think she's anywhere near 70 years old.
No, she looks. I was
Because
kind
her
of
and the daughter
wondering
looked
if.
about the same age.
Well, okay, I was kind of wondering if it was on purpose because of the way they did the flashback scenes, and they were all, they were themselves. They were the same age in the flashback scenes. Um,
Yeah. I thought that was
so
interesting.
I was kind of
He did the opposite of Scorsese. He's like, no, I'm not going to de-age these guys. Like, you get the idea. They're just having a flashback of the Nom days.
right.
It also makes it easier to figure out who's who without like a lot of extra dialogue that calls them by name or something.
Yeah, because
Yeah, I thought that was a really interesting choice.
besides Delroy Lindo, I don't know if I know what any of these other actors looked like when they were younger. Because I think they're mostly all character actors, right? And I think I mostly know them from like their TV stuff instead of their movie work. And I think I've only seen them as old men.
Yeah. Yeah, it was definitely interesting. Like, so was this filmed before pandemic and released during, or was it filmed?
It had to
kind
be
of
filmed
during?
before pandemic because it's got Chadwick Boseman in it, right? And Chadwick Boseman died not too long after this film came out.
That's right.
So
Yeah, because I was kind of wondering when it was filmed. Um,
it
I
had
don't
to
know
be
if it was
filmed around
because it was straight.
2018 or 2019. It had to be filmed somewhere between those times. Probably 2019 because, Black Klansman came out in 2018 and so he just won. So this is his immediate follow-up after finally getting an Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay.
Right. It did feel kind of weird, like the transitions and the cuts and stuff felt kind of odd to me because I was kind of wondering, like, when it was filmed. I was like, is it because they didn't have like a full crew, or were they shooting this kind of guerrilla style, or what? It did seem a little odd as far as like the transitions and the cuts in the movie and stuff went. But it's probably just me.
Well, if he shot it guerrilla style, then it's probably more in of him wanting to get that Apocalypse Now type of feel to it, which you do get a few references to that film.
I was
like
say the Flight of the Valkyrie on the river. When they're going down the river,
and then when they're at that little club.
Bar.
Yeah, the club and the bar with so there's a few references, which I mean makes sense. You know, it's a great movie, and there are some who would argue that what's that? I was gonna say there are probably people who would argue that Platoon or Full Metal Jacket are more accurate movies, but I don't know if there's a better movie in the Vietnam War that takes place in the Vietnam War than Apocalypse Now.
Right. Well, I was going to say another film that also touches on a subject that nobody likes to talk about, and it's a Vietnam film with Michael J. Fox.
Casualties of War. Yeah.
Casualties of War. That is a hard film to watch.
But yeah, it's a really underrated diploma film, and talk about another movie kind of showing an actor's chops you didn't think that probably people didn't think he had.
Yeah, because he was, that wasn't too far out of
well, it's released the same year as Back to the Future too, so
yeah. So yeah, that's another like I think Tom Cruise and Michael J. Fox for those two Vietnam movies, and go ahead and throw Charlie Sheen in there too from
Yeah.
Platoon. They all did a really great job. But another thing that I was gonna say, and I read this or saw it somewhere, was the way that these characters are portrayed. Because you have what was his name? Was it Paul? He's the guy with the
That's Delroy
PTSD
Lindo.
and the
That's Delroy Lindo's character,
yeah.
which there was a heavy campaign for people saying he should have been nominated for an Oscar for Best Actor.
Oh, for
And
sure.
I think he did get some nominations at some other award show, but the Oscars completely ignored this movie, even during
Right.
COVID. And I don't know if that's
Well,
because they nominated Judas and the Black Messiah, and they're like, "Oh, we got the movie in, so we don't need to put another one in there." I don't know, because
oh, yeah. Well, I know there were the way that they portray his character and Chadwick Boseman are they're both ends of the spectrum, and Chadwick Boseman is supposed to portray like Martin Luther King and the portrayal of peace. There's even that one scene where he's on the throne made of palm leaves, which I forgot the significance of that. I couldn't tell you right off the top of my head, but there's some biblical significance. Peace. That's right. Well, he's supposed to be. He even says in the movie, he goes when he's the ghost and he's confronting him. He's like, "Hey, blood, man, I died for you. It wasn't your fault. I died for you." He even mentions that. So he's kind of the Jesus character in this. When they find out, they're sitting there and they find out that Martin Luther King was assassinated, and Delroy Lindo's character, he wants blood. He's like, this is it. Let's go get blood. And Chadwick Boseman is like, no, we're better than this. We are beyond this. This is not who we are or who we need to be. And so he's kind of the fighter. So you have the Muhammad Ali type and the fighter, and then you've got the Chadwick Boseman, who is kind of represents the peace and the peaceful side of it, and the Martin Luther King ideology and everything. So I mean, there's lots.
Which is interesting. They cast
here.
him in that role because he was Black Panther too. So he's like still kind of playing this kind of ideal-esque person that's inspiration and a hero to them, And that might be why Spike Lee cast him in that role. He's like, well, you're Black Panther. I need you to play this kind of like hero, like, because they all kind of build him up. I'm not, he was their squad leader, their friend, but they all like have him like in this, like the image of him, because this is all from their memories, right?
Right.
But that's an interesting thing that you bring up about the parallels there of like both him and Delroy Lindo's character. Another thing I found interesting about this movie is that we have the French involved in this as well, because people forget that France was over in Vietnam first, and that's how we actually started in Vietnam, as we went there as advisors to help France, and then we ended up kind of taking over, inheriting the war.
Right. Yeah, they touch on that in Apocalypse Now with the French plantation that they wander into.
In the redo version. Yeah, in the longer cut.
Yeah, the redo. Yeah. And they not only did they touch on that, but the girl, the people who are there for the mines, you know, the girl who was there, who started Lamb, yeah, Love Against Mines and Bombs.
Yeah, she's French, and so is that other guy.
Yeah, and you know, she was like, my family came here and they exploited these people, and I feel like I need to atone for that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why they're there, you know, deactivating those mines and landmines, which are still out there, by the way, people. And it's crazy to think that all these years later, that there
Yeah,
are still
nearly 60
mines,
years later,
people
there's
tripping
still,
mines.
yeah.
Yeah, and but oh, there was something else.
Well, I think Chadwick Boseman's character, the reason he's kind of canonized as a saint in this story is because he doesn't, like, the other four have to go and deal with life after coming back, and he doesn't get that
Mhm.
opportunity. So he's kind of frozen in time for them as like the ideal, the peaceful
Yeah.
leader who's going to get them out of this. And then he can't, and he doesn't. And his legacy is what brings them all back. And you see how their lives have all been influenced by their experience there,
Right.
and how they all ended up.
And then you have Lindo's character, where you get a peek of why he has the issues that he has and the PTSD that he has, you know, killing, you know, his good friend, and then his wife, watching his wife die, giving birth to his son, and which feeds into him just being a really shitty dad, you know. Even with the PTSD and everything that was a cause of that fed into that. Yeah, it was pretty gut wrenching, pretty powerful.
Yeah, and I'm glad,
I
like, at when, you know, they get all this, you know, they find the gold, they debate about what they're supposed to do with the gold. And I'm glad that they took the guy's shares who died, and they donated it to Black Lives Matter, because he was like, that's what we were supposed to do with the money, was give it back to our people and help them.
right.
So that was nice when you
Right.
see that at the end of the movie.
I knew that was coming. Lindsay pointed it out. She goes, you know, somebody's going to get hit with a mine. What you want to bet? And when that guy stood up with the gold bar and started shaking it, you know, he was getting upset.
He literally, like, last word.
Yeah, and then boom, and I was like, yep. I mean, damn. But let's talk about the other underlying story that he had going on here, and the parallels that he had with with the MAGA hat. And
Well,
the
as you could clearly see when he made Black Klansmen, he clearly brought in and definitely touched upon elements of the Trump and all the rise of, like, this alt-right, and, like, of course racism has never gone away. It's always been in our country and continues to, but it,
right,
like, came to the forefront more so, and maybe it's just me being sheltered and privileged that I didn't notice like it was that bad. And of course, also, you know, we had an African American president that definitely brought out all the ugly racist people into the open, you know.
right.
He
Well,
clearly
there's that one. Go ahead.
he clearly has some things he wants to get off his chest, and at the time of this release of this movie, Trump was still president.
Right. And you know, there's that one part there at the end when he's shot, and he throws Jean Reno, his character throws a MAGA hat on top of him, and he lays there and he says, the madness, the madness.
Mm-hmm.
man, if that wasn't a shot, a, 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 a statement right there with a dying black man in the dirt with a MAGA hat laying on top of him. I mean, if that didn't hit you over the head, you were just clueless, because that was a very powerful statement right there, just in that one shot. And that's, he starts laughing, and he just, all he can say is the madness, the madness. And
Well, that's his friend's hat.
yeah.
Yeah,
So it's
that
just
was
like,
and of course they all make fun of Delroy Lindo when they're talking about it, because they're like, and you voted for him, and making all these like, you know. So, but yeah, that was Delroy Lindo's hat, and yeah,
Because that's what that hat represents ultimately. Like
Yeah.
you can try to make your own personal excuses for why you'd wear one of those or why you'd support somebody who spreads that kind of message around, but that's ultimately what it comes down to.
mm-hmm.
right. Yeah.
I don't know if it's good casting or if they like shopped the footage or whatever, but they show that man who's famously standing behind Donald Trump supporting him, and they blur out his eyes, but it looks like, I mean, with the censor bar, it looks like
Delroy.
yeah, like down to facial hair and everything.
And that's another thing I want to go back to. Now, Born on the 4th of July, that was what,
89.
89. And in the film, it shows them going to the Republican National Convention. The 72?
Yeah, this would be
The
Nixon's
Republican
reelection.
Convention. And it intercuts between everyone at the convention yelling at him like, "Get out of here, you traitor!" Blah blah blah.
Oh,
Yelling at
there's
him
a
like,
guy
"You're
that
not welcome
spits
here.
on
You're not
him.
welcome here." Yeah, and they spit on him, and then it intercuts with Nixon,
Nixon's
like
speech, yeah.
actual footage of Nixon saying, "Well, we should give the respect and the support that our vets need." At the same time, in the same convention, they're spitting
On a vet.
kicking
Well, and then
belittling
later,
vets.
the police are beating these paralyzed men. They're beating them.
Yeah.
Right.
They're
And you
paralyzed.
could hear them. Yeah, I don't know if you caught this, but it shows them, like, it shows the police like heading out of the tunnel, and I heard it in the background. They're like, parking violations, marijuana,
Listing all the things they're gonna
Whatever
tag
you-
him with to be able to start.
Yeah, whatever
the
you gotta
BS
do,
charges,
get 'em.
yeah.
And again, that's another that, to me, that parallels the MAGA hat. That's a parallel to me to the MAGA hat that's thrown on him at the end, where he's saying the madness, which again I think is a callback to Apocalypse Now, with him
The
saying
horror, yeah. Yeah.
So the
Which you could
parallels are
say
there,
that's
and
the war is also madness, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
and
Like,
it's
We all got to watch in real time the George Floyd riots. All the people who are arrested for protesting peacefully, they got bullshit charges thrown at them to be able to arrest them and to be able to grab everybody and get them out and disperse the crowd.
yeah, and I don't know.
They didn't even got out.
Mm-hmm. And I think this movie came out. Well, of course, that is all in the same year. I think this movie came out not too long after the George Floyd murder. So this movie probably even hit even harder with all the messaging he's interlaying with this Vietnam War movie.
yeah, it's I don't know, man. I think they're both really just. They're both.
feel like his character, like in wearing that, it wasn't so much the person he was supporting, it was just somebody justifying his anger
Yeah.
and taking it out on somebody else. It's like, yeah,
I
that's what I'm
think
gonna do. I know whose fault
I
it was.
I think you have justified, and I'm not saying like that's the reason, but I think that is tapped into why so many people supported him. Is it not necessarily did they like him? It's just like, oh, here's someone being angry. I'm angry.
Yeah.
Right.
You know?
Well, you know, he makes the statement about the illegals in the bar.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's just him he's just projecting his anger onto another group of people.
He does that in the boat when he freaks out about that vendor trying to sell him something.
Yeah.
He's like, it's
Well,
their fault, but really he's fighting with himself because he's the one who killed his friend.
and he does it to I mean, of course, Jean Reno ends up being a bad person, but he does it there too. And he's like, oh, well, you know, you'd be German if it wasn't for the Americans.
Right.
You know, like, oh,
Yeah.
you know. Which I do love
I
Jean
think
Reno's
both of these
response.
films,
Thanks for the gross understatement history lesson.
yeah.
Yeah, I do like that statement because in this movie specifically, I gotta watch more Spike Lee movies to know if it's a theme, but there are lots of like little historic blurbs that are showcased. Like
Yeah, he
real
does that a
history,
lot.
real American history. Yeah.
That's another thing I liked too, was the little intercuts of actual pictures, you know, describing these people and what happened, and just little screenshots that you get explaining it, you know. And
That landmine scene, he motivates his son with like a famous Olympic athlete, and you get that little history lesson. It's like Spike Lee knows that people are uninformed. He's like, I'm going to inform them. They're going to come watch movies. They want to be entertained, but they're going to learn something.
and
Yeah.
you know, he says, thanks for giving me that one-sided view of World War II. See, you know, going back to World War II and the atrocities, you know, a lot of people don't know about the bands of the gangs of AWOL soldiers that were running around France, raping people and, you know, doing what they pleased. You know, a lot of people don't want to hear about that. They don't.
Leaving people there because they were gay or they were some other marginalized group, and they're like, no, you stay here.
Yeah.
We're here to liberate. We're the good guys. We're going to liberate the good guys. The rest of you're supposed to be.
Right. And you know, a lot of people, they don't want to know the ugly truth. Like, yeah, we were going to do good, but there was a lot of bad too. That's
what's going on so much in our country right now, in a lot of our states, with our state governments trying to block certain things in history, right? They say we're teaching children to not love America. Well, if we don't want to repeat the mistakes we've made in history, then we have to be properly educated on the atrocities we have done, as well as the successes we've done. I mean,
we can't live in the first part of Roger Stone's movie. We can't live in that picturesque 1950s world anymore. It never existed. It was just what was fed to people, and that's what people want to remember. Like, I love my dad, and I'm not speaking against my dad at all, but he'll post things and tag me like, man, can we just go back to the good old days? And I want so bad to say, Dad, I love you, but the good old days, I mean, it might have been you may have had great times. I get it. I had great times growing up, but they weren't good old days for everybody. You know, they not everybody in the 1950s had a grand, picturesque time.
Well,
you know,
and some people would be freaked out by me saying this, but we actually should take a lesson from Germany. They actually properly teach their people the atrocities of their country and like, hey, that was bad. We shouldn't have done that. We're
Yeah,
sorry.
and it is a crime. It is a crime to show or sell or possess like any kind of swastikas or anything like that. There was a woman who went and I how was it Goebbels? I cannot remember the German the Nazi general's name, but this woman tracked down his son who was living in the Ural Mountains, who was a doctor, and this doctor knew of the atrocities that his dad had done. You know, he wasn't proud, and she went to talk to him, and she was like, "Well, what do you know about my dad? You know, there were things that I haven't even heard, like just the things that went on." Well, he ended up gifting her his notes and diaries during that he took during the Nuremberg trials.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, "Oh, this is awesome. I'm gonna take this back with me." Well, she got to the airport and realized that she had those documents uh, in her possession, and that was a crime. It's a crime over there. And she got to the airport and luckily was not detained. Like they either missed them or didn't search her bag thoroughly
Mm-hmm.
enough, and she got back to the United States with them. You know, it wasn't anything nefarious. It was just, you know, she was gifted these. He was like, "I don't want these. This is, you know, this is like a taint on my family. They need to go to
Mm-hmm.
someone who's gonna like preserve them for history's sake." And
Mm-hmm.
sorry for that little tangent. That just reminded me of when you
No,
talked
but I
about
was just
Germany and
saying,
the way and
well, because they actually, properly teach their country, like the horrors and like that it's wrong and don't shy
yeah.
away from owning up to it.
I mean, it took George Takei playing in a musical about the Japanese internment camps and him being vocal about it for a majority of the United States to even learn about it.
Yeah,
Because
wasn't his
I mean, I don't know
family
about
in
you,
one?
he was in one. Yeah,
Yeah, that's what I
he
when he was a
grew up in
child.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, I mean,
It's the concept that if you keep slapping a fresh coat of paint on a house that's falling apart, eventually the whole thing is going to collapse. Even if you try to brag about like foundations and amenities, if those are all corrupted or structurally unsound or built upon atrocities, like what's the point of continuing to like build onto that?
Well, and look, there's
yeah, it's
nothing
just
wrong with being proud of your country and being patriotic, but at the same time, being a patriot is owning up to your country's mistakes, I think.
right.
Pride has to come with accountability.
Yeah,
And
and
it's
we should strive to be better with each generation. We should want the world to be better than it was for the previous generation.
Right.
For all
Yeah.
includes
Americans.
fixing.
That's what we call glossing over history and feeding people what we want to feed them, and just overlooking all of everything else, overlooking all of the other atrocities that happened because of patriotism. That's that
Yeah.
patriotism is, if you want someone to be patriotic, you don't want to feed them the stuff. You don't want to feed them the bad stuff. You want to feed them the good stuff. Like, well, we went over there and kicked their ass, and that's all you need to know. You know, we dropped the bomb. That's all you need to know. We won.
Captain America version of
They,
things.
yeah, they want us to know the Captain America version of things, and not the whole story. And yeah, I mean, the same goes for, being taught World War II, and even watching documentaries and stuff from the History Channel, and reading these books and stuff. It's all about you know, the hardships that we overcame, and we all banded together, and we stomped the Nazis and the Japanese, and yeah. But no, we're not gonna tell you about the wild gangs of renegade soldiers that went and did things. We're not going to teach you about the people who were raped and everything, like in Vietnam. Like, they had soldiers that were raping Vietnamese women, and just being brutal, like killing women and children, because they were getting a kick out of it. Unfortunately, Ron Kovic did it. They did, when he did it. You were talking about the soldiers freaking out in the hut when they went in and saw what they did, but there were a couple of them that were like, well, "Hey man, let's just waste them, f them, and let's just waste everybody. Let's get out of here." Which, you had guys like that. You have people that had that mentality. They're just sick like that, and I'm not tainting all.
I'm not
I'm
here
not
to
tainting
say
soldiers.
anything bad about the military, but sometimes what they program men and women to do, some people's personalities maybe aren't best for that lifestyle because they take it too far, the becoming a killing machine. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. They thrive on that.
To do whatever in their country's name, they'll do whatever they feel like.
Yeah. Well, I was given that stamp. I've got that flag on my shoulder, and I'm gonna do it.
Isn't that what the John Cena character in the Suicide Squad says? Basically something like that.
Oh, I can't remember. It's been a yeah.
He says something like, "I'll do anything in the name of that threatens the name of freedom," or something. Of course, he's changed with the whole TV show arc and everything, but
yeah. But yeah, you're right. It's about programming. It's about dehumanizing someone to the point of of becoming a killing machine. And I don't know. Again, it's one of those subjects where I could probably talk on it for a long time, but I feel kind of silly because I have not served, and I don't know what goes through the mind of someone like that and what they go through. And
services in that context is a traumatic experience, and none of us can say what our brains would do.
exactly, because we haven't experienced that. And now, Chris, you and I are too old. So
hey, you know what? I'm actually kind of thankful for that, Cody, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but that is something that kind of haunted me.
When you came of age, right around 2001.
I came of age right at that point. Like I said, that 9/11 was our Pearl Harbor. Okay. And I was, one of the, okay. I remember exactly. I was working at Berkshire Brothers and Rusk. I had taken someone's groceries out because I remember it was earlier in the morning, and when I came in, someone had ran to the back and brought a little TV up and set it up on the front counter and turned it on. And I remember the little cashier lady. She was like, "Well, a plane flew into the building, and I'm like, "Holy crap!" So we're sitting there watching it, and I'll never forget it. One of the ladies turns around to me and she says, "There's going to be a draft because we're going to war."
Yeah, this isn't gonna.
Like this isn't
Yeah.
gonna be. This isn't good, and that
Yeah.
stuck with me. Like that, I was like, wow. And even after I chose not to sign up, that always I was that was always in the back of my head. Like, what if there is a draft? What if it gets so bad that they do start drafting? Because I'm in the prime age, you know. Like, what do I do then? So, you know, it was always something there that was just underlying that you would think about. And after my buddies went and signed up, you know, and you're watching the news and all that, you're just like, when is it going to happen? When is it going to turn to the point to where it gets so bad that they're not going to give me a choice? Yeah. So I don't
Yeah.
know. It's just, you know, lots of things to think about.
Yeah, and that's a whole
Yeah.
nother discussion about, you know, like the difference between going into Afghanistan and then going into Iraq, and then the things the government said to get us to go over there. And then, of course, the whole problem with fighting terrorists is you're not actually fighting an actual country. You know, it's like a whole different level of war. So,
And we still didn't, and it still feels like a Vietnam. We did not accomplish anything. And we were over there longer than any other war.
yeah, over 20 years, right?
20 years. Can you fathom that? I mean, look at the
Because didn't we just
what?
pull troops out when Biden became president? Or was it before
Yeah, because
Biden?
because it was right after election because he got criticized for it because of the way. And you know, yeah, and I will say, and I will say the way it was done, the way they did it, and the way it was done was a shit show.
In classic American fashion.
In
We made
classic
it.
American fashion, they withdrew, left things over there for whomever to get a hold of. They were overloading planes. You saw them trying to clamber on the planes and people falling off of the planes as they were taking off in midair.
Mhm.
It was like the evacuation of Saigon. They got out of there so
Mhm.
fast that it just turned into a shit show. We ended up leaving American civilians over there. We left God knows how many people that helped us over there who were going to
Mhm.
be picked up and killed and their families killed. Well, I mean, we just
Yeah,
left
for
them,
helping
and
us. Yeah.
it, it was a shit show, man. Yeah, it was fucked up, and I will criticize them for that because they should have known better. They should have taken lessons from
From
Vietnam.
from
No, look at
Vietnam.
Vietnam.
Mhm.
Look at the evacuation of Saigon. We left so many people over there that it was unbelievable. They didn't give any time for the children, you know, to get any of the children out. They didn't. They left sympathizers over there who were executed or sent to re-education camps. Um, it was bad. It was bad. And again, I know that's criticizing, and I know, again, you know, I'm sorry if I offend anyone,
But you're
but
criticizing the government. We're not
the
criticizing the
government,
soldiers.
yeah, I'm not criticizing the soldiers. That was straight up government fallacy right there. That was just screw up on their part. I'm gonna get off my soapbox because
Well, I mean,
boy,
we could go into such a huge rabbit hole of even how this all started because in the 1980s, we were giving Osama bin Laden weapons to fight the Russians.
yeah, right.
So,
We look at Rambo 3. Go watch Rambo 3, people, and you'll get it.
well, you can watch Charlie's Wilson's
No,
War too, which is about that.
yeah, yeah. Isn't he East Texan?
Yeah, he's from Lufkin. He's a state senator from Lufkin. Yeah, Lufkin,
Yeah.
Texas. That's got a great Philip Seymour
But
Hoffman performance in it.
Yeah, I didn't watch that, but now I'm kind of wanting to go.
It's fun. It's
Go and
fun.
watch
It's
that.
Tom Hanks, Julia Roberts. Yeah. So I mean, it's kind of wild what it's about, but yeah, it's a good movie.
Right. Well, I think an hour and a half is a good coverage for both of these movies because, like you said, we could go down the rabbit hole and keep going about these movies. But again, I want to reiterate, I will support our troops. I'm not um I'm not talking down about our troops at all.
Especially the people for like, especially like if where you live, that was the only way to get out. That was the next best step for you to take.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Nobody,
that's why my
nobody could.
dad, that's why my dad, when he struggled in school, he was actually dyslexic, even though they didn't classify it back then because they wouldn't test him. And, you
Right.
know, he was dirt poor. His family was dirt poor because when my grandpa made money, God knows what he did with it. So my grandma basically busted her ass her whole life just to make sure they could eat. And a lot of times they didn't have dinner. So my dad knew that was probably the best way to get out of the town he lived in and do something with his life was to join the military. In fact, he joined the Navy because the Air Force wouldn't take him till he was 18 and he was afraid he would chicken out before he turned 18. But yeah, that's why
Oh, wow.
he served. Because the Navy took him
The
at 17
military
years.
complex. Sorry, Cody, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying that's exactly why my dad was in the military and it helped him finish school and even, he got to take college because this is also back when the GI Bill pretty much paid for everything because I remember I was in
Hello.
class with a guy who was a vet and he told me that didn't cover like all it covers now is your tuition. Like it doesn't cover your books or housing or anything like that.
Right.
Well, that was also back when you know, you could get a hamburger for 10 cents or 25 cents and, you could make it on you could buy a house for, $25,000
Oh
and,
yeah, a middle class
you
family
know,
or even lower middle class family on a one person income could afford to pay for their child to go to college back then.
yeah. Um,
It's the complex that's exploitative. We're not going to victim blame and shit on people who that was their best option.
right.
That's not what we do.
Of course
Yep.
not.
Like I said, family and buddies and everybody else who went over there, that's the last thing I want to do. I might criticize the war, but I'm never going to criticize any of our people who went over there.
Look, I despise war. I think war is stupid, but I'm not going to say people who go over there, I'm not going to say anything wrong against them because they're the reason we're able to even have this discussion today. And
Right.
we should take better care of them across the board, mentally, physically. They shouldn't have to do another damn thing the rest of their life, in my opinion. Forget senators and presidents and governors. It's the people who serve this country that deserve what those people get.
Right.
And those people are the ones who are who underfund things like that, who cut benefits and scale back funding and all that shit. Those are the people who deserve the criticism.
Bingo. So, with all that being said, I think we can give a big old fuck you to the senators and the fat cats up there on the hill getting rich.
Well,
and
I'm going to give an
sending
especially
people off to die.
fuck you to most of the Republican congressmen and state senators and governors across this country, and fuck you to the Supreme Court right now.
Yep. And there's a few Democrats in there too that might as well just switch on over to the Republican
Oh
side.
yeah, the Democrats are not. They are not. guilt-free in this FU. There are definitely lots of Democrats who are equally guilty in this.
Yep.
So,
Well, so that was a discussion. That was a
Salad. You had a nice time. You just go through weather with your families Tuesday.
yeah. Just I know these are only movies, and if you watch them, that's great.
You say
No, well, listen. What I was gonna say is these are films. They are good films, but please take the extra steps to educate yourself and not just base your knowledge. Right, but past war movies and Vietnam movies. Yeah, I mean every war movie made up to Black Hawk Down to modern war movies, 13 Hours and Lone Survivor and all this other stuff. Educate yourself. Go, I don't care how you do it. Pick up a book. Go to the internet carefully, I might add. Go to YouTube
yes.
again carefully. Watch these interviews, watch these documentaries, watch these things. That's why I went and watched this stuff on Ron Kovac, because I was like, I want more context. I want to hear it from his mouth. And it just hit that much harder. So educate yourself. Educate yourself on these wars. Don't just take the spoon-fed stuff that these news outlets are giving you and what the government wants to spoon-feed you, because this goes back to being blinded by patriotism. You can be a patriot, but don't be so much of a patriot that you overlook the atrocities and the horrible things and the things that and avoid accountability for these things. Don't be so much of a patriot that you're sitting there thinking, oh, our vets are okay, they can suck it up, they're okay, they're being taken care of. No, they're not. They are not being taken care of. They're homeless vets. Our VA hospitals are still underfunded. What was it here about 2 or 3 years ago? We had a gentleman go in and shoot up a VA hospital because he couldn't get the care that he needed, the psychiatric care or any of the care that he needed, and he snapped. Because in our modern day and age, we're still shitting on those people, and we are not taking care of them. And it's horrible. It's very horrible. You can take that Ron Kovac story and move it to modern day, I guarantee you, and it would still be just as relevant. You could still make a modern day movie out of his story, and it would still be just as relevant.
You could set it right now, or even 10 to 20 years ago, about someone who went to Iraq or Afghanistan, and it would still ring true of what happened to people over in Vietnam.
Right.
Yeah. And I wish I could remember the line, but it's such a powerful thing of what you're talking about, blind patriotism. And in Black Panther, when Killmonger takes over, and Lupita's character and the guard lady, I forget her character's name, and she's like, I have to serve my country, and she's like, well, I'm doing this because I love my country,
Right.
She's like, sometimes you have to do the thing that doesn't seem like the right thing to do because you are doing the right thing to do. If that makes sense.
Right. No, it does. It does. Well, I think we got a pretty hearty discussion in on that. And again, if anybody watches this and you're interested, please go. There's lots of things out there that you can educate yourself with. If you're just a movie person and you're not a big history buff, there's several other movies that you can check out to get, kind of some of this from.
Well, I think the Five Bloods you can watch and just enjoy as a movie. Even
Right.
though there's a lot of stuff that's unpacked in it. But I think if you're not wanting a history lesson as well, if you're just wanting, I think there's enough of a movie there too to just enjoy as a movie. But might leave you thinking
Right.
about some things, or I hope it does.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh. All right, man. Well, I think that was a really good discussion. That's probably one of the best. I think all of our shows are great, but I think this has been a really good one, and I think it was a good choice for those two movies for our July 4th. Instead
Definitely
of
one of the more
just going
serious
full blown.
conversations we have had on the show.
Right, and it very two think pieces for sure. But do you have anything coming up this weekend you want to plug or?
Yeah, season 1 of the director's chair is kicking off on Sunday. We'll be talking the pilot and episode 1 of Twin Peaks for David Lynch.
Nice. Over on the director's chair.
It's going to be me and Kevin Polly and Colin Smith, and we'll be talking Twin Peaks for quite a while, and then we'll do the rest of Lynch's filmography after that.
Cool. Well, that sounds fun. I will definitely chime in if I'm available. Watch and I know that'll be a fun convo. Let's see. Monday, we were going to do it tonight, but we had to postpone. Monday, we're going to do we'll have another technical difficulties. We decided to talk courtroom episodes, and we chose Measure of a Man, dealing with the ethics behind Data being a sentient being.
Oh, that's a good episode.
Yeah, that was whether Data was a thing or an actual person, a sentient being, and it's a very good episode. If you like Star Trek, and surely you've seen it. If you haven't,
that's
go
season
check it out.
2,
season
right?
2.
Yeah,
season 2. Great stuff, and by the way, that actually ties in to Picard. If you're interested in that, if you didn't know that, so that'll be fun. So yeah. Yeah. Well, he died. Oh, sorry. My bad. Nothing. Sorry. Enjoy your show. Tune into Picard. Anyway, so slip of the tongue there. But yeah, anyway, and we'll talk about what we want to do next week in group chat. I'll post it on the page, and we'll decide what we want to do. I know we got our birthdays coming up. This month. And
we do.
We got our birthday picks.
Yeah, I got mine ready.
About you, but I'm still torn on mine. I'm still torn, but I'll mention it. I don't want to mention it here, but I'll mention it in group chat.
Okay.
Yeah, but anyway, yeah, we'll post it and we'll go from there. And if anybody chimed in or they chime in the future, thank you so much for listening. We appreciate it. And yeah, I guess we will see y'all next week.
Yeah, to TBA. Everybody have a safe and happy weekend. Stay cool, hydrated, and also your slip of the tongue reminded me of something. Listen, I know some people are sensitive to anything that's mentioned or shown about films or TV shows. if said property has been out for years or decades, it is spoiler. The spoiler-free embargo thing is off the table. Also, if it's something that's seen in the movie that's not really a plot development, it's not really a spoiler alert. But if
Right.
you're sensitive to that stuff, then just don't get on the internet. I'm sorry, if a movie is 10 plus years old, spoiler alerts are going to happen. I mean, like Nick said in our Spider-Man discussion, if it's a great movie, you knowing something that happens in the movie isn't going to affect how good the movie is. Like,
Right.
I knew it. I knew the first time I saw Psycho that she gets killed in the shower. Didn't stop me from still thinking the movie was incredibly well done.
Right.
Like I wasn't alive in 1960, so the spoiler was already ruined for me. I already knew when I watched the movie for the first time. But I still thought it was a really great movie just because that's how well made it is. So that was just my soapbox because I've seen people complain about spoilers, and I'm like, this is an old movie, and that's not even like a plot spoiler. That's just something that happens in the movie.
I think if I ever run across, I think if I ever run across that, I'm just gonna go to the video store and rent it to them.
Well, and another thing is, if they're announcing on the internet and on movie websites certain characters are appearing in a movie, that's not a spoiler. They're letting you know that, but you can also avoid that by not being on the internet. I know people, they don't get on the internet, they don't read news, they don't watch trailers, and that's fine. If that's how they want to experience a movie, that's great. But if it's being shown or announced, because they know what they don't want to spoil. Movies,
Right.
they do that.
Well, it's like me
now
with Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm gonna watch. I'm watching it tomorrow. By the way, it just hit streaming. I take
well,
that
it's
back.
VOD.
It
it's
hits
on
streaming.
VOD.
Yeah, it picks up tomorrow on VOD, but I will be watching it. But I have remained pretty spoiler free. I mean, overall, I know that Rocket has some scenes with his buddies and stuff like that, but that's all I know. I've avoided the major things, and that was a choice. But you're right. If it's on the internet, but it's been out for a while, so if I see someone talking about it, then I just avoid that. Because it's a personal.
That's what
choice.
I do too. When I see something, I'm just like, okay, I don't want to know, so let me not read that.
I don't get mad at them. That movie's been out for a couple months. It's beyond spoiler free. Like if we're talking about it within the week of release, I can understand.
Right. If it is even a month, I'd say a month to 2 months, because after that, it's pretty much this day and age, it's coming out on VOD. Now, there's a few movies that haven't, but still, if you want to see a movie and you don't want to know anything about it, and I'm not saying people go in and post things that spoil an entire movie, but like just because there are going to be things that get shared and stuff that happens.
Someone did that I accidentally went into a feed that people were spoiling Flash. The Flash movie. So I already know all the cameos that pop up, which I saw some of the screenshots, and great looking PS2 game, by the way. I have to throw that out there.
That is one of the complaints about the movie is the use of CGI. I can't wait for that game
to come out on PS2. Yeah. But I'm not hating on it, because I honestly, I can't wait to watch Batman 89 Part 3 myself. So yeah.
Tread lightly. Climb back under your
crawl back under that rock.
Just hide and wait it out.
Yeah, just tread lightly on the internet. But I just wanted to get on that because I was like, I understand people not wanting to know anything about a movie, but like, then that's your job to, that if you're sensitive to anything or any material, then just avoid it. Don't read it.
Right.
Plus, it's not like all of our discussions are clearly labeled, and we definitely talk about a million other things within the discussion. So,
well, the only time I mention spoiler alerts is when we happen to talk about a brand new movie, because the nature of our discussions, we're going to spoil a movie, and they're usually movies that have been out a while. So,
Right.
that's just the nature. If you don't want to know, if you haven't seen the movie and you don't want to know anything about it, then go watch the movie first and then come back and watch and listen.
Right.
Which is really the recommended thing to do anyways with a podcast. Now, I've listened to podcasts where I haven't seen the movie before or not, but it's usually older movies. But in general rule, that's a good thing to do anyways, is watch the movie first, because then you have your opinion of how you felt about the movie, and then you can listen to other people talk about it and see whether you agree or disagree, or somebody brings something up that you're like, oh, I didn't think about it that way, or something. That's what it all is. But I've ran for over 10 minutes on this tangent, and I'm sorry. So let's call it.
No, it's okay. It's okay. This is probably one of the longest shows we've had in a little while.
Yeah,
energy and strength for things.
We still got about an hour to go if we want to top our Blade Runner episode.
Yeah. Well, Cody, thanks again for coming on. I know we ran kind of late for a weeknight, but
we
really
appreciate it.
Yeah, these two movies really brought up a lot of things that that just aren't talked about a lot in history classes and stuff like that, or weren't when I was growing up anyway.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these things you don't find out until you're older or in college. In college.
Or you don't find out till you watch a TV show or a movie about it. Like, that's what happened with me with Watchmen and the whole Oklahoma massacre in Oklahoma City. I was like, I didn't know that thing happened. Oh my God, that's horrible. And then I found I found out it happened in Slocum around the same time. So
my memo told me about that. My memo was yeah. I remember my memo talking about that.
Learning is a lifelong journey.
Mm-hmm.
Media
well said. Well said. I think that's a good closing note for the night. So good night. Thank you all. Maybe next week something a bit lighter, or something not such a heavy discussion. Doesn't have to be a lighter movie, but maybe where we just talk about the movies.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe not something with deep.
No soapboxes next week if we can help.
Right.
We'll probably get on something.
Slocum, the 1910 Slocum massacre. If anyone is interested in doing a little research on that. Yeah, it's harsh, but I mean, people need to know. I mean. Again, this is something I didn't find out until my memo told me. It's not anything that we read in any Texas history books or anything like that. And yeah, I mean, pretty harsh stuff.
Yep. All right.
Bye, we love you.
All right.
Bye. Yeah, thanks, guys.
We'll see. We'll see all you guys next week, and enjoy your week. Like Cody says, stay cool, hydrated, and have fun out there.
Oh.